Hi, it's Brian, and this is the DC Report. In our recent cover story for Time with my colleagues Charlotte Alter and Phil Elliott, we wrote about how Biden has a turnaround plan to jumpstart his sputtering campaign. Biden's campaign has a large cash advantage, and the campaign is rolling out big TV and social media ad buys. But Israel is increasingly a wild card that could become a bigger issue for Democrats as we get closer to November. The war in Gaza is now over 6 months old, and Biden's support for Israel has been consistent, but Biden's shown a shift. After aid workers for Chef Jose Andres' relief agency, World Central Kitchen, were killed by the Israeli military in Gaza, we started to hear a different approach towards Israel from the Biden administration. Democrats, voters, and leaders are increasingly fractured over the loss of civilian lives, and what is happening in Gaza is an issue for the Biden campaign too. Longtime Democratic organizers feel torn by Biden's military support for Israel, and protesters are interrupting Biden's events. And there are protest votes too. During primary elections, some Democrats are choosing to skip over Biden's name on ballots and vote uncommitted, no preference, or uninstructed. Let's look at the recent Wisconsin Democratic primary. 48,000 voters voted uninstructed. That was about 8% of Democratic voters, and Biden won with 88% of the vote. We don't know how this will impact Biden's results in November. But here's what's interesting on the Republican side. In Wisconsin, where Biden saw the high tally of uninstructed voters, Trump got a lower percentage of the Republican vote, 79% to Biden's 88%. It was the Nikki Haley factor. In the Republican primary, 12% of voters went for Haley, and she dropped out of the race at the beginning of March. That shows us that while Biden has to contend with Democrats frustrated with his Israel policy, Trump is also struggling to get votes from Republicans frustrated with him. The Biden campaign also told us that they see uncommitted votes as a way for Democrats to make their voices heard, but that in the end, they believe many of those frustrated Democrats will come back to Biden. Now, the point of the uncommitted movement is to get Biden's attention and get him to pressure Israel into a ceasefire that will save lives in Gaza. Now, we're seeing some changes. At the beginning of April, with a tense phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Biden said things need to change, that Israel needs to let in more aid and do more to alleviate human suffering, or Biden will change U.S. policy. That shift reflected the global response to the attack on the World Central Kitchen aid workers, and it's clear that the Biden administration is responding to the increased outrage of the public and world leaders too. Biden's been frustrated for months with what he called an indiscriminate bombing campaign by Israel in Gaza. Biden's given Netanyahu this ultimatum for more food aid to get into Gaza and for the Israeli military to prevent aid organizations from being bombed. American weaponry is still being sent to Israel. Long-standing contracts for bomb deliveries were approved the same week as the World Central Kitchen aid workers were killed. How did this happen? Those bomb deliveries were part of a long-standing military aid package to Israel that was agreed to under the Obama administration. Biden does have the ability to stop it or slow it down, and that's one thing that the president could be referring to when he tells Israel things will change if more aid doesn't reach Gazans. Still, the American military support for Israel goes beyond its war with Hamas, and American officials point out that American weapons are needed there to defend Israel from threats coming from Iran and Hezbollah on its northern border as well. I was at the White House briefing on April 4th. Does the president think that Israel's war against Hamas is taking too long?
The president believes that they have a right to go after the Hamas threat, which is still viable. And the president made it clear again today that we support and we will continue to support, not just philosophically, but tangibly, Israel's right to defend itself against a range of threats, and certainly that includes this fight against Hamas. But again, I want to reiterate what I said earlier. It's not just the threat of Hamas that Israel's facing. They are facing broader threats throughout the region, including directly and publicly from Iran.
Iran is another unknown for the administration. Tensions were further escalated in early April when an airstrike widely attributed to Israel destroyed an Iranian consulate building in Syria. The U.S. has been trying for months to avoid being dragged into a wider conflict with Iran. In an election year, all of this has an outsized potential to impact the way that voters perceive the candidates. We'll be watching and reporting back.